All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION this hour, where the British Parliament has now said that the farmers' protests, the widespread farmers' protests that are taking place in India for well over 2 months are an internal and a domestic matter of India. Now, addressing the lawmakers, the House of Commons' leader, Jacob Rees-Mogg, said that India is a proud democracy with which the United Kingdom has very strong relations. Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg further added that respecting agricultural reform as India's domestic policy issue will be his line that he would take. Listen in.
India is a very proud democracy and a country with which we have the strongest possible relations. I happen to think that over the next century our relationship with India may well be our most important relationship with any country in the world. And as India is our friend, it is only right that we make representations when we think that things are happening that are not in the interests of the reputation of the country of which we are a friend. So I would say that the Foreign Secretary discussed the farmers' protests with his Indian counterpart in December. The UK government will continue to follow the farmers' protests closely, respecting agricultural reform is a domestic policy issue for India.
All right, so that was the statement that was made by Jacob Rees-Mogg over the farmers' protests that are happening, widespread farmer protests that are happening across several cities in India. This after there was a request for a debate in the British Parliament on the issue of India's farmers' protests. Now, remember, farmers across many cities have been staging their protests against these farm laws that have now become extremely controversial. Now, almost about 70% of India's population directly depends on agriculture for its subsistence. But the farming sector has been in dire need for reforms. No one questions that. But these laws that were passed to address the situation within India's farming and agriculture sector, the farmers have come out and said is not something that they had asked for. Now, the farmers want these laws to be completely revoked, saying that they fear the minimum support price or the MSPs will be gradually scrapped. This despite the government's repeated assurances that the MSP, which is the minimum support price which the government guarantees for a certain produce, will not be axed. But the farmers turn around and say that the track record of the government is not to be trusted. Now, several rounds of talks have taken place between the government and the farmers that have failed to end the deadlock between the government and the farmers. All right, now to get us more insight in terms of what actually was discussed within the British Parliament on the issue of farmers' protests in India, we're joined in by WION. Siddhant Sibil is joining us live on this broadcast. Good morning to you, Siddhant. Now, bring us up to speed with what actually transpired in the British Parliament where the issue of India's farm protests came up.
Well, yes, Mohammed, it is primarily a reiteration of the official policy of the British government. This is not the first time that there have been attempts to raise the farmers' issue in the British Parliament and that too by the same MP. We know that in December as well, just before the visit of the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, we saw the same MP trying to raise that issue. But of course, we know that the British Prime Minister back then had fumbled and talked about India-Pakistan relationship. Then, of course, number of written questions were raised in the British Parliament in which Nick Adams, the Minister of Asia in the British Foreign Office, replied on similar lines, saying that farm laws are India's internal matters, and primarily when it comes to the protests which are happening in India, these are concerning issues raised by the British government multiple times with the Indian government. In fact, these things were in fact raised by the visiting British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab when he was in India in the month of December. But these are part of the normal democratic processes. Parliaments, especially with huge Indian diaspora, whether it is the United States, whether it's Canada, whether it's UK, there have been attempts to raise such kind of issues in the parliaments, in the local legislative bodies. But by and large, what has been the official policies of these governments, Western government, has been to support India in its own domestic matter in these laws, because agriculture is something that is India's domestic matters, while also talking about that there should be freedom of expression, something that India has also been doing in the past. So by and large, there is nothing new in terms of development which is happening. It is MP who is of course more concerned about his constituency, who has a lot of people coming from Indian diaspora, and trying to raise this issue. But the good news is the British government backing India. In fact, the relationship, if you talk about between Britain and India, is one of the strongest relationships talked about by the minister himself. The British Prime Minister was expected to visit India. He could not because of the COVID crisis. He is expected to now visit India in next few months. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also expected to visit UK for the G7 summit, for the COP26 summit. And of course, UK needs India in a world which is post-Brexit. India needs UK in terms of various multilateral organizations, including the UNSC, where India is the non-permanent member for 2 years. UK is a permanent member, the P5 member. So these kinds of engagement are expected to continue. And what has happened in the British Parliament, or comments by celebrities in the US, is part of a normal democratic process.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Siddhant Sibal, for joining us and getting us all those updates then.